This week on Culture Q,
the highlights and very low lowlights of this year's Emmys.
Veteran journalist Sonari Glinton talks about queer media representation.
And we celebrate inclusive swimwear at Fashion Week.
It's Lalwani here.
And I'm Shira Lazar. This is Culture Q.
And here's some of the highlights this week in queer culture. Starting out in entertainment, if you missed it, RuPaul had a historic win at the primetime 73rd Emmy Awards. He snagged his 11th Emmy for RuPaul's Drag Race, becoming the record holder for a black artist with the most Emmys in history. But this big victory drew attention to a major issue. Despite the historic diverse nominations, 49 non-white creatives were recognized in acting and reality competition categories this year. All the major Emmy acting trophies ultimately went to white performers though. Many of these nominees were favored to win, like SNL's Bowen Yang and Pose's Billy Porter and Michaela J. Rodriguez. Rodriguez would have become the first trans woman to win in a lead acting category, and she is the first trans woman to get nominated for a leading actress award. Nonetheless, she lost to the crown's Olivia Colman. Carl Clement Hopkins made history for becoming the first non-binary individual to be nominated for the Primetime Emmy Awards for his role in Hacks. And their outfit was a showstopper on the red carpet, to say the least. They proudly displayed the colors of the non-binary flag. With all that said, the hashtag #EmmysSoWhite quickly trended throughout the evening, showcasing that a lot of work still needs to be done, and not just during awards season. As LA Times entertainment and arts reporter Ashley Lee noted, the Emmys is like that TV show you're still watching just in case it finally does something different. But every year it proves you wrong, and it does the same old thing again and again and again. It was also disappointing after last year's Emmys, where Zendaya, Uzo Aduba, Regina King, and Yahya Abdul-Mateen II all won for acting. But I do have to say there were a few great standouts, including Michaela Coel. Coel became the first black woman to win the Emmy for Best Limited Series Writing for her series I May Destroy You, which was snubbed at the Golden Globes earlier this year. And in the end, she left us with this very powerful message.
Write the tale that scares you, that makes you feel uncertain, that isn't comfortable. I dare you. In a world that entices us to browse through the lives of others to help us better determine how we feel about ourselves, and to, in turn, feel the need to be constantly visible. For visibility these days seems to somehow equate to success. Do not be afraid to disappear from it, from us, for a while, and see what comes to you in the silence.
Now let's take a look at what's happening around the world in LGBTQ news. The Gay Games has been postponed. The Olympic-like competition was set to begin for its 11th year in Hong Kong in November of 2022. Instead, they'll now begin in 2023 because of the ongoing pandemic. According to the co-chair of the Games, Dennis Phillips, the move is meant to leave room to adjust and adapt to changes and uncertainties regarding travel restrictions. Many are hoping that one of those changes is to move the Games out of Hong Kong because of China's human rights violations in Hong Kong. Moving on to Europe, where LGBTQ rights continue to be threatened in Hungary. The country has introduced new propaganda laws that will restrict access to films with queer content. Similar to laws in Russia, no one under 18 can see a movie where queer or trans issues are a defining feature of the narrative. The change is meant to protect young children. Okay, we know how that goes. And while no movies have been cited, movies like The Eyes of Tammy Faye and the upcoming Black Panther follow-up, rumored to have a lesbian love story, would likely be impacted. It's the equivalent of giving these movies an R rating, which you would think would make more people want to see them, but that could just be me. But that's not even the worst of the draconian measures Hungary's put in place recently. Last year, they banned same-sex adoptions and restricted trans people from legally correcting their gender. In response, the EU has threatened to sue Hungary and withhold billions of dollars in funding. Meanwhile, in Vatican City, the Pope gives a contradictory message once again about LGBTQ people. While speaking with the media on a flight home to Rome last week, Pope Francis said, "Marriage is marriage, but this does not mean condemning homosexual people. These are our brothers and sisters, and we need to be close to them, but marriage as a sacrament is clear." Okay, but Pope Francis didn't really see the disconnect in his words, though. When first asked by the Italian journalist about new legislation that would recognize marriage equality all across Europe, he said, "I've spoken clearly about this. No? Actually, no. The Pope's insistence that Catholics should embrace LGBTQ people while also heading up a church whose official stance remains that homosexual acts are, quote, intrinsically immoral and contrary to the natural law is far from clear. I mean, his acceptance are pretty much contradictions on everything he has said about the issue. This past June, the Vatican delivered a letter to the Italian embassy claiming that a proposed LGBTQ rights bill against hate crimes and discrimination would infringe upon the church's religious freedom. I wonder what the Bible has to say about hypocrisy and if the Pope has any thoughts. And that's your queer news from around the world.
Sonari Glinton is a veteran NPR journalist who a lot of you might be listening into. His now new podcast titled Now What's Next focuses on the economy and what's next for the American people. I am here with the amazing Sonari Glinton. First of all, I love all these records behind you.
Aretha Franklin, Sinatra, Ella is constant.
Before we go into a wormhole of that, because I know we could talk for hours of all these different pieces of music, how did you get involved, for those who may not know, with NPR?
Like many people, my life changed after September 11th. I was working in finance. It was a moment of transition. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna see about this journalism thing. Because I worked in finance, I had savings. I worked my way into public media, and I eventually became a producer at NPR, and I was the only Black guy on the business desk. I was the only Black guy on Planet Money.
Did your identity as like an out person also contribute to those spaces, or how did that play into a lot of those roles you're in?
Finance is really homophobic. One of the very first stories that I did, I interviewed Jeremiah Wright, who was famous for being Barack Obama's pastor. His church was the first church that I knew of that was open to gays and lesbians in the Black church, and he did this in the late 70s. The very first story that I did that had got any acclaim, I produced the story about the Cook County Juvenile Detention Center in Chicago. And a group of kids were like, "Are you gay?" And I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "Are you out?" It's like, "Yes." Like, there was something about these young people. I don't have a choice about going back into the closet. It wasn't until now I realized that that may have caused problems in my career. I didn't see it at the time.
What do you think the future right now looks like for a lot of LGBTQ people?
I realized from, maybe it's the gay culture, is that the young people will lead us. And they're just much better people. The Little Nas X's, I might compare him to someone like Martin Luther King, but there are also the A. Philip Randolphs, the people who are older, who might have been able to use their financial resources or other things to help that movement along.
And in terms of media, in places like NPR, as an out person, how do you think that's changing currently?
Sam Sanders did a show about coming out. That's a genuine progression. Diversity, genuine diversity. It's not some kumbaya thing. If RuPaul can win 11 Emmys, when that show came out, that was such a fringe idea. The person who might make you the most money is a drag queen. Yeah, and if you're open to that, just imagine where the buckets of money that are completely untapped.
Thank you, Sonari, for joining us. If you want to check out all of the new work he's up to, check out Now What's Next.
By the way, I love Sonari, kind of fangirling right now, but moving on to this next story, where a class action lawsuit is trying to stop insurance companies from discriminating against LGBTQ couples. Emma Goidel filed the suit against Aetna Insurance in New York. She and her same-sex spouse are enrolled in Aetna's health plan at Columbia University, which covers fertility treatment. And that's where the discrimination comes into play. Their policy provides immediate fertility coverage for couples who've tried to have a baby for 12 months. For LGBTQ couples like Emma and her spouse, that means they must pay for out-of-pocket fertility treatments like IVF for those 12 months before they can get covered. You see, heterosexual couples don't need to do this. Emma and her spouse have had to pay $45,000 before receiving coverage. Heterosexual couples with the same plan would not have to pay anything at all. In her suit, Emma points out that this doesn't just discriminate against LGBTQ families, but might prevent many from starting a family in the first place. The suit calls this an illegal tax on LGBTQ people that violates the Affordable Care Act and other New York City and state anti-discrimination laws. While Emma is now pregnant and overjoyed, she's also outraged at the cost. In response, Aetna told Reuters they are still actively investigating the facts. And Emma's fight is far from over. She shared with Time magazine, reproductive rights have to be more than just the right to end a pregnancy. They have to include the right to begin a pregnancy. No one should have to pay thousands of dollars to start a family.
The latest in fashion is a revolution, but we're not talking about AOC's Met Gala dress. Trans activist, writer, and filmmaker Tourmaline recently partnered with fashion designer Becca McCharron Trans's label Chromat, which is known for creating empowering fashion for all bodies. On the last day of the New York Fashion Week, the pair unveiled their work at Reese Park Beach, aka a historic LGBTQ landmark. Down the boardwalk runway, the models wore the all-red, lifeguard-inspired swimwear collection known as COCK, or Collective Opulence Celebrating Kindred. On Instagram, Tourmaline explained the collection is all about the sexy fun that happens when you're able to be fully yourself. And by you, Tourmaline means everyone, even those who may not feel fully comfortable expressing themselves on the beach. As the post mentions, the new swimwear was designed for girls who don't tuck, non-binary, and intersex people, and everyone embracing collective opulence, celebrating kindred. Tourmaline told Fashionista that part of the idea was having varying degrees of coverage for those who want more or less of it. Model Jordan Harper explained why this swimwear matters, telling Them magazine, "This is the first time I've ever been seen untucked. It's liberating. I feel really connected to my body. I feel free. I couldn't ask for anything more. I get to live life and be me." For Tourmaline, creating this feeling for beachgoers was personal. She also spoke to them and discussed memories where she feared getting out of the water because she didn't want others to see her body.
Finally, we're keeping that positivity going here on Culture Q. A big mazel tov to Colorado Governor Jared Polis, who is the first sitting governor to have a same-sex marriage. Polis married his longtime partner Marlon Reese in a traditional Jewish ceremony at Reese's alma mater, the University of Colorado in Boulder. Polis has made many historic firsts. In 2018, he became the first out gay man to be elected governor. Previously, he served as a Democratic representative in the U.S. House of Representatives for 10 years. His 2018 election made him part of a record number of LGBTQ candidates seeking office that year. Polis celebrated posting this on Facebook. "We are both excited for this new chapter in our lives, and our hearts are full with the blessings of health, love, and family." Reese, who is a writer and animal rights activist, told Colorado Public Radio that they didn't set out to be the first of anything. Things sort of just happened that way. In fact, they chose their wedding date because it was the 18th anniversary of their first date. It's just adorable. And they have since grown their family. Their daughter was the flower girl and their son, the ring bearer. As Polis also tweeted, "After 18 years together, we couldn't be happier to be married at last."
This week on the internet, we got some news that the kids are all right. That's actually what podcaster Rex Chapman tweeted in response to this viral TikTok. The TikTok is of a 12-year-old boy playing the popular video game Call of Duty, taking shots at his friends while also calling them out on their homophobia. As you can see, he dominates the game while explaining that LGBTQ means more than just gay, that being trans doesn't necessarily mean you're gay, and even asks them if they'd stop being friends with someone just because they were gay. He then tells his friends that,
"You just blatantly admit to being homophobic. You realize that means I automatically don't like you."
The boy's sister recorded the video from behind and identifies as a member of the LGBTQ community. She told the Daily Dot that she talks to her brother regularly about LGBTQ rights and the Black Lives Matter movement. She felt that it was really nice to know that he listens. And millions of others have listened too, especially with their responses on social media. Editor Jen Simpkins tweeted, "Kids are good, actually." And reporter Jean Park shared the clip with the message, "This is how kings sit."
No word on whether or not he won the game, but he's definitely a winner in our books.
With that inspiring intention to speak up, it's Lalwani signing off here.
And I'm Shira Lazar. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
And be sure to tune to Culture Q each Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, live and on demand, only on Revry.